am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm joined by the Pretty Pancake, and together we are going to be discussing about Cosmic Trinity and why Dark Athena plus Raw Dragon are faltering, as well as the idea of a support team. So, presently speaking, Cosmic Trinity does offer the most challenging encounters that are currently available on a regular basis, but it is gatekept behind 3-player co-op, which means you have to enter as a 3-player co-op team, and that does have its own hurdles because you can get interesting teammates, as well as having trust issues because you may or may not like your teammates you are given. So, Pancake likes to mimic what I do because apparently my hand gestures are weird and silly, but new teams have been emerging lately, such as Kushinari Hime, Anubis, and other combo-centric teams that have the ability to clear Cosmic Trinity with relative ease by comparison. And for the most part, Raw Dragon and Dark Athena are lacking at this point in time, and this article will be examining as to why they are, as well as exploring the idea or concept of running a support team to support your allies. So, I do have a video on YouTube of showing the support team in action. Basically, I will discuss that further down, but basically the idea was I had 2 skilled players who I chose to run with me. I basically just provided utility and safety, and we went through the dungeon quite easily. So what is Cosmic Trinity? Well, Cosmic Trinity is a challenging 3-player co-op dungeon that has random spawn encounters, so you can't necessarily plan against what you will be facing, so it can be a little harder, as well as an end boss that is somewhat the hardest thing you'll ever encounter perhaps in Puzzle & Dragons, at least on a regular basis. So, towards the end, at least for the random spawns, they tend to have 50+ million health, so you need to be able to deal and dish out very large amounts of damage, and ideally you should be able to do so without relying on skill inheritance, because in 3-player co-op, active skills take a long time to charge up, because you have to wait for... your skills only charge up on your turn, so you may be waiting for a very long time for that gemstone, so unless you have ways to punch out that 50 million, or everyone's coordinated enough to actually stall patiently, you may have issues with lower damage output teams. And finally, the end bosses do have 200 to 500 million health, so you do have to be warned for that. So this is definitely one of the more challenging dungeons currently available, so again, you should execute careful planning and strategy before jumping right in. So, with that being said, what are the more ideal teams? So, presently speaking, these are the leaders that tend to have more success. They don't have to rely as heavily upon their partners to do well, and this is obviously not a end-all be-all list, but generally speaking, Kushinari Hime, Anubis, Dark Metatron, the Blue Male Hunter, as well as almost any pairing of those with Diabolus is very powerful and dangerous. So these teams, well, Diabolus is kind of an exception. Like, we count him making other teams better, but the 4 other teams listed beforehand, they tend to feature similar characteristics. They're innately durable, or they have easy to activate multipliers. They have the ability to pump out large amounts of explosive damage, as well as being able to utilize more ideal or desirable subs for the most part. So, with that in mind, why not Dark Athena or Raw Dragon? So, even though Dark Athena and Raw Dragon are some of the more popular and powerful leaders currently available, they have been somewhat power creeped out of Cosmic Trinity, just because of the way their kit works and the subs they can bring for more ideal teams. So, Dark Athena is very well situated for content like Arena 3. In fact, it's one of my favorite solo farming teams because she's just so well equipped to deal with all the spawns, because she does have the capacity to dish out large amounts of damage, especially for content like Arena 3. Those spawns of 8 to 10 million health can fall over from the TPAs with 7 combos, but hitting those 50 million plus for Cosmic Trinity is not feasible. Maybe with orb changes you can, but still going to be a struggle, because the fact of the matter is Dark Athena only has 49 times multiplier, and 49 times is not that high, even though you can stack some 7 combo awakenings with TPAs, but the fact that the base is so low, it can be challenging without having to use various orb changers, and basically you're going to have issues because by comparison, Dark Metatron is 81 times, can use the same set of subs, but you're hitting for significantly harder amounts of damage, so you may not necessarily need those orb changers, you may not need to use the gemstone bursts, etc. So, in addition to lacking that offensive firepower, Dark Athena's recovery and very much her sustain ability component is directly tied to matching water and dark orbs. And the fact that you have to match water and dark orbs means you're going to be A, dealing damage, so stalling is not as ideal, but B, you're also potentially taking away the orbs from, say, dark Metatron teams. But in addition to that, you have to heal by doing damage, and that is problematic because you may have situations where you just want to heal, or you don't want to, or you may not actually have dark and water orbs present, because having to rely on 3 different orb types to be present to heal is a little bit of a downside. Last but not least, in solo mode, it's very commonplace for Dark Athena teams to use the Time Extend badge, just because the team just comes with so little as a natural fact. And it helps because it is challenging to match with only 5.5 seconds of orb movement time. If you start sacrificing your Hakus for Time Extend subs, your damage output goes down, so it's kind of like you want more time, you're going to lose damage, or unless you have great puzzling skills. So there is a drawback that a lot of people may say is a player skill issue, but to a certain extent, it is challenging to match those number of combos with restricted amounts of orb movement time. So, by comparison, Raw Dragon does suffer similar setbacks, but for different reasons. So, Raw Dragon is a rainbow team, and even though they can achieve 144 times multiplier, the fact that you need to match all 6 elements is going to dilute your damage potential. Because, in theory, say you can make a pure mono-light Raw Dragon team. It's not going to be ideal necessarily, but say you could in theory. You are going to have to match 15 orbs worth of space for the other colors. So that means you're less than likely to have lots of light orbs present, but to compound this further, you cannot actually use any orb changes. You have to rely on Dark Kali style boards, because if you use any orb changer, your maximum multiplier goes down. So you may have more light orbs, let's say hypothetically, but you don't have your maximum multiplier, so your damage output will be gimped regardless. So that is a challenging aspect, because with at least Dark Athena, you can pop orb changers, and from that you are able to plow out massive amounts of damage. So that is a little issue, like the damage dilution, just because you have to match 6 colors, 6 elements, and you cannot use orb changers. Furthermore, if you want to pump out damage for Cosmic Trinity style bosses, you're going to have a very tough time with Raw Dragon, because they can definitely excel at pumping out like 8, 9, 10 million damage with the standard team, but when those things have 50 million health, you're going to hit like a wet noodle. Not very hard and not that satisfying either. So, if you want to obviously overcome that, you can use gemstones, but then again, to charge up a gemstone in 3-player co-op is challenging. Even if you inherit a gemstone on top of something like Isis, it's still going to take quite a few turns, and you have to have at least coordination from your partners to stall long enough to actually have it charge up in time. So, where does this kind of leave Raw Dragon? Like, they do have nice bulk. Like, they do have 2.25 times health, and they have 2.25 times recovery. But unlike Dark Athena, the recovery component is not conditional. You can match recovery just by having hard orbs on the board. So that is a definite bonus. However, again, like Dark Athena, in order to heal, you are most likely going to be dealing damage because you need to match combos. And when you match combos, you're probably going to be hitting lots of different elements and thus pumping out some damage. So it can produce challenging aspects for stalling. However, if you do deviate from the ideal Raw Dragon team that we've seen with 2 Dark Kalis, Kana, Isis, you are able to at least bring killer subs like Tsubaki's, Aniseries, and Mito, and they have either Devil or Dragon killers, and those are ideal for killing off the final Cosmic Trinity bosses. However, they're not necessarily going to be reliable because you may not have those encounters for the first several floors, so Raw Dragon does at least have some potential to kill the final bosses, but they have to rely on those killer cards. But without those killers, they're not going to be doing much damage, so they have to kind of rely on other teams. So with that in mind, you kind of maybe could build Raw Dragon as a pseudo-support build, and I'll explain that further down in the article/video. So, what if Raw Dragon and Dark Athena are your best teams? So, since Pad is obviously somewhat of a luck game for acquiring certain rare machine cards, you cannot necessarily control who you acquire, but Raw Dragon and Dark Athena are able to be purchased, and because they can be purchased, you would only make the purchase if it has reasonable merit or value for your monster box. So a lot of players have Raw Dragon or Dark Athena as their strongest teams, and even though they're not ideal for Cosmic Trinity compared to the 4+ Diablos I listed beforehand, they still at least have the potential to clear Cosmic Trinity. It's just going to require a lot more work and effort and or planning coordination on your part and with your teammates. So even though your damage output's not going to be as spectacular, you could always try and build yourself more as a support-oriented role. And basically, the idea with a support-oriented team is that their main goal is to support your 2 other players. You obviously have to rely on competent users to have enough damage and sweeping potential, but the idea is you're going to be bringing the utility-based active skills such as delays, gravities, and shields, as well as board changes or hazard removals to basically make the life for your teammates significantly easier. So the main idea is you want to provide this type of utility and safety to allow your teammates to focus more on killing things, as well as giving them, again, that measure of safety. So, for example, if you are to use Raphael as a leader, you're going to hit like a very, very limp wet noodle. Like there's no damage output. However, you're going to have tremendous amounts of health, massive amounts of recovery, so you're not really going to die. Furthermore, Raphael's base active skills are amazing shields, so you can basically protect your allies while loading up on the utility active skills. Furthermore, if you are able to bring a card like Zeus and Hera that deals 45% gravity, you are able to actually bring a 10% or any other gravity style active skill, and you would actually be able to push resolve bosses below 50% and thus avoiding dangerous or problematic situations. So again, that can be invaluable if your teammates don't have follow-up attacks. Yes, with follow-up attacks, life is going to become easier, but at this point in time, until we get the Urds, or Urd, Scald, and Verdandi, we don't have access to follow-up attack unless people have gotten lucky in Monster Hunter Collab. And even so, the gravity-based strategies are useful because you can chunk down the final boss floors by large amounts of health. So the main idea is the support team can basically help your partners out. So, for example, this is obviously a luxurious-based support team. You don't have to obviously follow it to the T. It is not necessarily accessible, even though the subs are quote-unquote farmable. Because the Zeus and Hera is farmable, my 3 Orpharians, which I do have and I use in the video, are farmable, obviously out of reach for the average player. But the main idea is you have the Raphaels with their base active skills, Zeus, Hera with their 45% gravity, Sakuya with a gravity plus bind clear to save yourself, Susanoo, which should be Indra, but I don't have them for shielding potential. And Dark Athena is actually a reasonable delay because their base cooldown is only 11, so you could obviously use them as subs, but the main idea is Orpharians are kind of the ideal support sub because they have 3 skill boosts and gigantic weighted stats, as well as massive amounts of health, and this pushed my team over 140,000, so I don't really die, as well as being able to set up boards and tank hits, removing hazards, etc. So the main idea, like I said, is with a support team, you want to bring utility. So you want to have like shields. The Raphaels are a pseudo shield. Susanoo is a shield. Sakuya, Zeus, Hera is the gravity to push beyond resolve, and Dark Athena is a delay to basically avoid certain encounters. So obviously the team you build will vary from person to person, so it's a matter of just bringing what you have available, but at least make it clear that you are kind of playing that support role if you have these types of utilities. But ideally you want to have enough skill boosts and enough durability to at least survive to the end. So, in conclusion, Cosmic Trinity is an amazingly challenging and somewhat unforgiving dungeon because of the random spawns and the very scary amounts of damage and health pool that the bosses are able to put out. While Raw Dragon and Dark Athena may not be as ideal, they still are at least able to participate for sure. They're just not going to be as powerful or potent as the other options I listed beforehand. However, you still could build Dark Athena and Raw Dragon as more support, utility-oriented teams. However, even if you don't have any of these cards available, there's lots of other teams that can find success, but again, the main goal is to find ways to enhance your chances of success, not just for yourself, but for your teammates. So, let me know what you think about Dark Athena and Raw Dragon in Cosmic Trinity in the comments below. Do you believe in the idea of a support team? Do you try and coordinate, or do you queue up with random players? I hope you all have a mantastic day, and happy puzzling. Bye!